right, I'll call this meeting to order. City staff, do roll call, please.
Yes. Carlson,
Yes.
Crescilis, Parker,
Here.
Pretorius,
Here.
Russo.
All right, I will do the opening statement. The Board of Adjustment is a quasi-judicial body created by the City of Iowa City according to state statutes. The board's purpose is to decide on applications for variances from zoning ordinance, appeals of decisions of city officials, and applications for special exceptions requested under the zoning ordinance. The Board of Adjustment is an independent volunteer board made up of Iowa City residents and is not part of the city administration. We are assisted in our work by the city attorney's office and by planning staff. Prior to this meeting, board members received the material submitted by the applicants, the staff reports, reviewing the application, and any correspondence submitted by members of the public. Board members have not discussed the application or its merits with each other, staff, the applicant, or any other member of the public in advance of this meeting. All consideration and discussion by the board takes place in open meeting here tonight, where we also have an opportunity to hear from the public. The board bases its decisions on facts and evidence allowed by city code presented in open meeting. Concise and truthful testimony helps us a great deal in our decision making. We ask that if you wish to speak, that you speak clearly into your microphone, state your name and your address. As testimony can be heard by all present and by our minute taker, as all testimony becomes part of the public record. We ask that proceedings be orderly and that when you are testifying, you address your remarks to the board. If this hearing becomes lengthy, we may ask that your testimony be focused on new facts or on information not already presented. The order of proceedings for each application will be an oral report by staff summarizing the issues of the case and staff's recommendations, an opportunity for the applicant to speak, an opportunity for any interested parties to speak for or against the application, an opportunity for any final statements or arguments by the applicant and staff. The board will discuss the issues and evidence, state its findings, and vote on a motion. Motions are always made in the affirmative. Go ahead and move on to the public hearing. And the first item on the public hearing is going to be EXC 21-0006, an application submitted by Iowa City Ready Mix Incorporated, requesting a special exception to enlarge an existing heavy manufacturing use in a general industrial I-1 zone to construction addition at 1854 South Riverside Drive. All right, the public hearing is now open and we will hear from staff.
Thank you. Okay, we can all see the screen, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, apparently started at the end. Give me a second. So we can all see it again, right? Okay.
Yep.
So the agenda item up first is EXC 21-0006, an application submitted by Iowa City Ready Mix for a special exception to enlarge an existing heavy manufacturing use in an I-1 zone to build an addition. So here you can see the site plan for the concrete plant highlighted in white dashed lines. It's on the west side of the river, south of the highway, along Old 218. It's on South Riverside Drive, which acts as a frontage road to the west. And it is currently zoned I-1. Surrounding zones to the west are P1, which is public zones. To the south, it's additional I-1 zones. And then to the northeast, it is CI1, which is intensive commercial, which does have a mix of, it's not all intensive commercial uses. Some of them are public uses, but it's all zoned CI1. So as far as background for this application, the applicant is the owner of the concrete manufacturing business at 1854 South Riverside Drive. And that is considered a heavy manufacturing use, which is only allowed by special exception in the I-1 zone. So this use has been here for a long time, since 1963. It did become a conforming use in 2005 when it was awarded a special exception to build some additional buildings. The site currently contains 3 buildings, which includes what I will call the primary building, the building where the addition is proposed for, So that has some equipment, but it also has the offices. And then there are 2 additional pole frame buildings on the site. And the current application would allow an enlargement of that primary building with an addition. So the addition is the north side is on the left side of the screen. So the addition is primarily on the north side of the building. And there's also on the east side, a 2-foot expansion of that wall as well. And then it's a little taller than what's there currently, as it will enclose some existing equipment on the site. And to put that into context for you on the actual site plan, this is what it looks like. So it's that north side of the building primarily. The east side, again, is about 2 feet. So I didn't highlight that for you. And to phase that in, that's where that addition is on the north side of the building. This is what it currently looks like, looking east, that primary building. This is looking south between South Riverside Drive and Old Highway 218. You can see some of the cement mixers on the site. And then this is looking northeast between South Riverside Drive and Old Highway 218. You can see that there's some trees up there and some additional cement mixers are parked on that street, but it does dead end up there on that north property line. So the role of the board tonight is to approve with conditions, or deny the application based on the facts presented. To approve the special exception, the board must find that it meets all applicable approval criteria, which includes both general and specific criteria. So the specific standards for tonight are found at 14.4b 4c4, which is pertaining to heavy manufacturing uses in CI1 and I1 zones. There are a couple criteria for this. The first is that it has to be located at least 500 feet from any residentially zoned property. There are no residential zones within 500 feet. The nearest one's probably around 1,000 feet away from the subject property, so it meets that standard. The second is that all proposed outdoor storage and work areas must be located and screened to adequately reduce noise, dust, and visual impact on surrounding properties. So in this case, staff finds that the proposed addition will reduce noise and dust because manufacturing equipment and silos will be replaced and enclosed in the building envelope, which are not currently enclosed. Otherwise, other buildings on the property won't be impacted. And with the addition comes some updates to the facade, which will have a positive visual impact. The third criteria is that traffic circulation and access points must be designed to prevent hazards to adjacent streets or property. So the property is primarily accessed from 3 curb cuts along South Riverside Drive, which, as I mentioned, is a frontage road for Old Highway 218. And most of the site around the primary building is paved. So that's where they're providing access and circulation through and around the site, which includes to those other buildings. And it's where they provide some parking for their equipment as well. So with the addition, it's relatively small. It does retain adequate space for circulation to the north and east. And otherwise circulation and access won't be affected. So the north and east is where those additions are again, but other circulation won't be impacted. And the equipment replacement is not expected to significantly increase the daily truck traffic. So staff finds that this criteria is met. As far as general standards go, there are 7 located at 14.4b3, and they're just the general standards for special exception review. The first is that the specific proposed exception will not be detrimental to or endanger the public health, safety, comfort, or general welfare. Staff finds that the addition will enclose new manufacturing equipment within the building, and that new equipment is expected to decrease load times into the mixers and increase on-site storage capacity, which should decrease reliance on other shipping tankers or other dump trucks. And so as a result, it's not anticipated that daily truck traffic will increase as a result of the addition. In addition, surrounding roads don't have sidewalks or bike trails, so pedestrian interaction is pretty minimal, not as much of a concern. But the property is in the 100-year floodplain. It does barely touch the property, so I'll show that in a minute what that looks like. But it means that a floodplain permit will be required to document that the addition will not be in the 100-year floodplain. So where that 100-year floodplain is, it's mostly along the north and east property line. You can see the the primary building in the center of the site, and the addition won't expand into that 100-year floodplain, which will need to be documented with a permit. The second criteria is that the specific proposed exception will not be injurious to the use and enjoyment of other property in the immediate vicinity and will not substantially diminish or impair property values in the neighborhood. So the property to the west that's in the public zone is the airport, the public Iowa City Airport. The addition is in the transitional zone of the municipal airport to the west. So that restricts maximum building height to 75 feet approximately. The addition is significantly below that, and it won't impair the use of the airport as a result. And the FAA has already accepted the proposed addition, so that was included in your packet that you can see. As for other properties in the immediate vicinity, they're zoned I-1 and contain industrial uses or light industrial uses. And we haven't had any owners raise concerns over the proposed addition yet. Some may be here for the public meeting tonight to speak. But we have not heard any at this time. As far as to the north and east, those trees screen the use from the public trails, which are across the Iowa River. And the project, again, will improve the building's appearance, so it won't, staff finds that it won't impact negatively surrounding properties or their values. And here's what that airport map looks like. So you can see the runways kind of in this purplish color and the runway zones in red. Those tend to have higher restrictions. The transitional zone is in orange and the yellow circle is approximately where the building is. So that's about where that 75-foot height limit comes in. The third criteria is that the establishment of the proposed exception will not impede the normal and orderly development and improvement of surrounding property for uses permitted in the district. Staff finds that the addition is relatively small and the building will be more than about 100 feet from adjacent properties to the west and south and about 50 feet from public property to the north. The surrounding neighborhood is already developed with industrial and public uses. And so staff doesn't believe that the addition will affect future development or improvement of those properties. Fourth criteria is that adequate utilities, access roads, drainage, and/or necessary facilities have been or are being provided. So the site does currently have adequate access to utilities. If there are improvements to utilities that are required, they must be approved by the appropriate entity prior to construction. And the applicant noted that they've been in communication with those entities as well. As far as other facilities such as roads, access drives, stormwater management, we're not expecting it to be significantly impacted by the proposed addition, but compliance with the city's building code and other requirements will be reviewed during site plan and building permit review as well. So staff finds that that criteria is met. The fifth criteria is that adequate measures have been or will be taken to provide ingress or egress to minimize traffic congestion on public streets. So in this case, the property is accessed from South Riverside Drive. The road does dead end north of the property, as I've shown in that picture. And so traffic is primarily limited to vehicles accessing the property. As far as circulation around the building, adequate space is retained with the addition. So the addition is not, or in addition, it's not expected to significantly increase traffic. So staff finds that this criteria is met. Sixth criteria is that except for the specific regulations and standards of applicable being considered, the specific proposed exception will conform with all other regulations. So staff looked at a couple different things here that I wanted to point out to the board. So first, the addition will be about 50 feet tall, which is slightly higher than the maximum base building height allowed in I-1 zones. However, for every additional 2 feet of setback, the building may have an additional foot of height. And with the building setback that currently exists, that provides approximately 8 additional feet of height that can be provided. So the addition does comply with the maximum building height, taking that standard into consideration. With regards to parking, the on-site buildings total about 20,000 square feet, 20,800 square feet. And heavy manufacturing uses require 1 parking space per 750 square feet of floor area. And it requires 2 loading spaces for uses that have between 20,000 and 40,000 feet. So that 2 loading spaces is already barely triggered by the existing on-site buildings, but the additional 600 square feet of addition will require an additional parking space that will need to be provided. Another criteria that comes into play is that the sensitive areas ordinance requires a 50-foot buffer between the river and development activity. Based on staff's evaluation, the addition is outside of that area. Otherwise, staff will ensure that the site design conforms with applicable zoning standards and regulations, including those related to the parking and the sensitive areas during site plan review. And then again, I had noted earlier that the property is in the 100-year floodplain, but that the proposed addition appears to be outside of the floodplain, and that will need to be confirmed with a floodplain permit. And so that will be another review process that will be part of this. And the final criteria is that the proposed exception will be consistent with the comprehensive plan as amended. So as far as future land use designations look, the comprehensive plan shows this area as general industrial, and the South Central District Plan shows it as industrial manufacturing uses. And the comprehensive plan does include a goal to increase the property tax base by encouraging the retention and expansion of existing businesses. Based on the property's current land use, it's consistent with the comprehensive and district plans, and the proposed exception will not change that land use. So staff finds that this criteria is met. Based on this review, staff recommends approval of EXC, sorry, that should say 21-0006 to allow enlargement of a heavy manufacturing use within a general industrial zone for the property located at 1854 South Riverside Drive in order to construct an addition. And we have not received any written public comment to date. So that is staff's presentation. Do you have any questions for me?
Thank you, Kirk. It doesn't seem like we have any questions at this time. All right. Would the applicant like to speak at this time?
Yeah, I'm Matt Napper with Iowa City Ready Mix here at 1854 South Riverside Drive. And we basically need to replace equipment inside our plant, and that's kind of the sole purpose of this. And rather than spend all the money to get exactly what we have in here, we got room and we know we've got the area to make something that's going to load our mixers a little bit faster. And that's kind of the main reason we want to be able to get just that little bit more length on the north side of the building so we can get a little bit bigger piece of equipment to replace the one that's in here. But we also want to make it so it's similar to other concrete plants where they actually enclose the entire plant and the silos. And right now we've got the silos that are currently sticking up through the roof, which does make it not look as nice. So that's where we wanted to be able to enclose it like other businesses that are similar to us, where they actually do enclose their two silos that they have that are sitting right on top of the plant portion of it. So that's kind of what we want to do with the tower that's going to be going on right in the center of our building. It'll cut into the east side of the building area just by probably 2 feet, kind of showing on some of the different pages in that packet. But we shouldn't, basically we're just looking at the gut of the building from the north end to the south end is what we're going to be doing the work at, and then wherever we got to tie in to make it look good on the back side of the building, so we can still tie it in, whether or not that would have to be replaced with the walls, but keep the foundations in place. Hopefully we can just keep that all the same. But yeah, I mean, that's basically what we want to do. Is the equipment we got in there is stuff that's been around since 1963, and it's getting difficult to find parts to replace things on this right now. So it's at that time where we just really need to replace what we got in there, and we want to increase the capacity so we don't have to rely on tankers and trucks on a daily basis. So that's where it'll cut back on the amount of tankers that come in here periodically, like throughout the day, because we'll be able to hold more capacity, so we won't have to be relying on them near as much. I don't know if anybody else has any other questions on what we have proposed here. Like I said, we've already got the approval from the airport, and we do already have the floodplain permit approved. So this was kind of that next step, so we can get a contractor on board and get some designs put together, more than what you see here, with some actual structural details.
Thank you, Matt. Do any members of the board have any questions for him before we see if anybody else wants to speak in favor of the application? Doesn't appear so. Is there anybody here tonight who wishes to speak in favor of the application? Anybody who wishes to speak against the application? And any additional comments for staff? Unless the board needs more clarity on anything, if somebody would either like to make a motion or I will go ahead and close the public hearing, I guess, unless somebody feels that there's a motion to defer for any reason. All right, no motion on the table, so the public hearing is now closed. If a board member would like to make a motion then to put this on the table for discussion.
Okay, I move the approval of EX
21.
an application submitted by Iowa City Ready Mix requesting a special exception to enlarge an existing heavy manufacturing use in a general industrial zone to construct an addition to 1854 South Riverside Drive be accepted. Is that correct?
Yep.
Does the board feel need to have any discussion on this?
A second.
Oh, thank you, Ray. Sorry. All right. So we've got a motion, no discussion, a second, and if someone would like to make the findings of fact.
Regarding item EXC 20, I concur with the findings set forth in the staff report of July 14th, and conclude that the general and specific standards are satisfied unless amended or opposed by another board member. I recommend that the board adopt the findings in the staff report for the approval of this special exception.
All right. If there's no other comments from the board members, let's go ahead and vote. Roll call, please.
Do we need a second on that, Sue?
No, as long as there's a consensus.
Okay. Roll call. Russo,
Aye.
Carlson,
Yes.
Parker,
Yes.
Pretorius,
Yes.
Crucilis, absent.
All right, the motion is declared approved. Any person desiring to appeal this decision to a court of record may do so within 30 days after the decision is filed at City Clerk's office. Excellent. All right. Moving on to item EXC 21-007. This is an application submitted by Shive Hattery on behalf of Regina Catholic Education Center requesting a special exception to enlarge an existing general education facility use in a low-density, single-family residential RS-5 zone to construction an addition at 2150 Rochester Avenue. The public hearing is now open, and we will hear from staff.
Thank you. Okay. I'm showing the correct screen, correct? You can see EXC 21-0007. Submitted by Shive Hattery on behalf of Regina. It's a special exception to, similar to the last one, enlarge another use. In this case, it's a general educational facility in a low-density residential single-family zone, and that is at 2150 Rochester Avenue. So the location map included in your packet shows the entire site where the property is. You can see the school building is in the center of the site. It is located north of Rochester Avenue, west of North First Ave, and it is zoned RS5, as I had previously stated. To the north, it is zoned PI1, which is again public uses. To the east it is RM12, which is low density multifamily. And then to the west and south, there's some additional RS5. And then also to the south, there's CN1, which is neighborhood commercial. So the applicant is designing an addition for Regina. Again, the subject property is pretty large, but the addition is relatively small. And like in the last use, general educational facility in an RS5 zone is only allowed by special exception. In this case, Regina has expanded many times, and so they've gotten several special exceptions in the past, and they have to get one anytime an addition is over 500 square feet. So the current application would allow an addition that is approximately 1,850 square feet. And it's actually two additions, which I'll show in a minute. So one is in the south center area of the site. One is on an interior courtyard. So this map was included in your packet. You can see that they are relatively small compared to the massing of the building. And it does replace some existing area on the site. So just to look at how that compares with the existing aerial again, you can see an entrance that is kind of in the south central part of the site right now. So this would expand that into a courtyard to the northwest, and it would expand it in an open area to the southeast. And then again, to the north, there's that small expansion in the interior courtyard as well. And so if we phase that into the site plan, you can see that it would cover up some of the green space in the interior courtyard and in front of the building itself. Here's just a picture of Regina looking northwest from the street. This is a closer picture of where that addition would be. So you can see that shortest part of the building in the center of the image is the existing part that would be replaced partially. And you can see the green space in front of that, and you can see the tree behind, which is in one of the interior courtyards. Here's a close-up of that part that's going to be replaced. And the site plan also shows some reconfiguration of the sidewalk. So this is where you would see some of that sidewalk reconfigured along here, including an ADA ramp as well. So the role of the Board of Adjustment tonight, you are charged with approving with conditions, or denying the applications based on the facts presented. To approve it, you need to find that it meets all applicable criteria, which includes specific standards for the waiver requested and general standards for all special exceptions. So in this case, the special standards are general educational facilities in RS5, RS8, RS12, and RNS12 zones, and that is located in the city code at 14, 4B, 4D, 11. The first standard is that the following setbacks are required in lieu of setbacks specified in the base zone. So they are 20 feet for the front and side, and they are 50 feet for the rear. So in this case, the proposed additions are in the central south side of the building, and they comply with all enhanced setback requirements. The second specific criteria is that it must be designed to be compatible with adjacent uses. So Regina has been around here since 1958, and as I stated earlier, multiple additions have been approved by special exceptions over the years. So we're only looking at the most recent addition. The additions are small compared to the scale of the building. So total buildings on site are approximately 165,000 square feet. The proposed addition is 1,850 square feet. And the additions are not expected to increase occupancy due to the uses of both the proposed and the existing uses in that space. So the site plan shows that the existing area has an occupancy of 303, and that after reconfiguration, it will actually decrease to 277. Occupancy will actually be calculated during the building permit review, but we're not expecting occupancy to increase as a result of this. So based on those findings, staff does believe the proposed use will retain compatibility with adjacent uses. Third criteria is that any requests for parking beyond the minimum are carefully scrutinized by the board. So in this case, Regina has two parking lots, one that is along Rochester Avenue that has about 130 spaces, and one to the north, which has about 170 spaces. So that's about 300 spaces total. The proposed application does not affect parking or increase parking in any way. And the required minimum parking for the use is currently about 226 spaces. With the proposed addition being small, Regina will be able to maintain adequate parking on the site to accommodate any new added space. The fifth criteria is that the building official, I'm not going to read this one. This one basically says that if it's less than 500 feet, the building official can approve it without a special exception. Otherwise, it has to come to the board for approval. So in this case, the proposed addition is 1,850 square feet. And so the building official can't approve it, which is why there's a special exception application before you tonight. And then the final specific criteria is that if it is located in a residential zone or central planning district, which it is, it must comply with the multifamily site development standards, which are at 14(2)(b)(6) of this title. So many of the multifamily site development standards don't actually apply to an institutional use in a RS zone. So that includes things like parking design, building entrances, balconies, exterior stairs. In this case, though, the addition does have to comply with some standards related to aisles and drives, building scale, building materials, mechanical equipment, and then there are some other standards as well. Staff reviews these during site plan review. Well, looking at this application, staff did notice that there might need to be some minor site plan changes to address the minimum required setbacks between the internal drive aisle and the proposed addition. This could also be addressed through a minor modification. Those issues can be worked out in site plan review. So staff doesn't believe that that is a concern, and staff believes that this will meet this criteria as a result. For the general standards, again, those are at 14(4)(b)(3), and they relate to all special exception applications. So the first is that it can't be detrimental to or endanger the public health, safety, comfort, or general welfare. Staff finds that the additions are specifically designed to improve the safety and general welfare of pre-kindergarten program by providing a more secure entrance. That's one of the purposes of the addition. And staff will ensure that other applicable life and safety standards are met through the building permit process. There's also a part of the project that will create a new ADA accessible ramp where there currently is not one. So that will also improve accessibility of the site. And based on these findings, staff believes that this criteria is met. The second is that the exception will not injure the use or enjoyment of property in the immediate vicinity or affect property values negatively. So as I noticed previously, the proposed addition is small, not expected to increase occupancy, and it's approximately 450 feet away from the closest property. It's also pretty far back on the site itself, and so it won't negatively impact the public view. So staff believes that it won't have any negative impact on surrounding properties. The third criteria is that it won't affect normal and orderly development of surrounding property for uses in the district. Generally, the surrounding neighborhood is already fully developed with a mix of residential, commercial, and open space uses. I say developed, meaning with where there are open spaces, it's expected to remain open space, just so that's clear. In addition, the additions are set back far enough from the property line to not affect development or improvement of surrounding properties, so staff believes that this criteria is met. Fourth is regarding adequate access to utilities, access roads, drainage, or other facilities. Like I had noted, the property is already developed, which includes utilities, access roads, drainage, and other facilities. And it's also developed for the surrounding neighborhood. The project does include the replacement of some existing sanitary sewer, some improvements to the stormwater management systems, which you can see on the site plan. Otherwise, other standards and regulations will be met through the site plan review and building permit processes. Otherwise, those would not be approved. So staff finds that this is met. The fifth criteria is that adequate measures have been or will be taken to provide ingress or egress to minimize traffic congestion on public streets. So for the subject property, site is provided from a paired one-way inbound and outbound drive on Rochester, and then there's a two-way drive that's on North First Avenue. Internal circulation is provided along internal drives, which provides access to the building and the on-site parking. Pedestrian access to the building is slightly modified as a result of this. They are going to replace a curb, like I had stated, with an ADA accessible ramp, which will improve overall accessibility, but otherwise changes aren't going to be made to the parking or to the existing driveways, the public sidewalk or the street. So based on those, staff believes that adequate measures are already being taken to minimize traffic congestion on the public streets and that the standard is met. The sixth is that it must conform with all other regulations or standards of the zone in which it is located, except for the one being specially accepted. So looking at the site standards, the additions will not cause the property to exceed the maximum lot coverage or the maximum lot height. The addition is only 1 story, so those are pretty easily met. Again, setback requirements are already met by the proposed additions. And I had mentioned the multifamily site development standards that will be kicked in. So I did not discuss them there because it has its own specific criteria. But otherwise, staff will ensure that applicable standards and regulations are met through the site plan review and building permit processes. And then finally, that the proposed exception will be consistent with the comprehensive plan of the city as amended. The future land use designations for this site in the comprehensive plan is public or semi-public. And in the central district plan, it is shown as private institutional. There is also a vision for the comprehensive plan that neighborhood schools, particularly elementary schools, are an integral part of a healthy, sustainable neighborhoods. Schools serve not only as centers of education, but as a focal point for the community gathering and neighborhood identity. The addition also won't change the land use of the property, and otherwise it is consistent with the plans as adopted, and so staff believes that this criteria is met. And based on these findings, staff recommends approval of EXC 21-0007 to allow an 1,850 square foot facility or addition to a general education facility use within a low density single family residential zone for the property at 2150 Rochester Avenue. And for this one, staff did receive a public comment, but it wasn't so much regarding the special exception. I did include it in your packet. It was more concerning the public notice that they received. It did not include any concerns about the special exception after I communicated with them a little bit. But again, that's in the packet. So with that, that concludes staff's presentation. If you have any questions for me.
Thank you, Kirk. It doesn't sound like any of the board members have any questions at this time. Would the applicant like to speak?
Sure. My name's Natalie Epidal, representing Shive Hattery, who is representing Regina at 2150 Rochester Avenue. I just wanted to say that this addition is essentially allowing Regina to bring all of their pre-K classrooms into a localized area of the building. Right now, they're kind of spread out, and as Kurt outlined, it also increases the security for that pre-K program, especially as people are visiting, halfway through the day and things like that. So yeah, just any questions that you have for us, just let us know.
Board, any questions for Natalie at this time?
I don't have any.
Great. Is there any other member of the public here tonight that wishes to speak for the application? Any people from the public who wish to speak against the application? I think that's a no. Any last questions for staff? All right, I'm not sensing any questions, contention on this one, so I don't think that anybody's going to make a motion to defer. With that said, I will go ahead and close the public hearing. So the public hearing is now closed. Is there a board member that would like to make a motion to approve a special exception to put it on the table?
I'll make that.
Mark, go ahead.
I don't have the correct verbiage in front of me, but I make the motion to approve the EXC 21-007 in addition to the Regina complex to enlarge an existing educational facility.
Is there a second?
I second it.
Any discussion the board wishes to have at this time? Take that as a no. And if somebody is prepared to make the findings of fact,
I guess I can do that one. Regarding item EXC 21-777, I concur with the findings set forth in the staff report of July 14th, 2021, and conclude that the general and specific standards are satisfied unless amended or opposed by another board member. I recommend that the board adopt the findings of the staff report for the approval of this special exception.
all right, I believe we are prepared for a vote. Roll call, please.
Carlson,
Yes.
Parker,
Yes.
Pretorius,
Yes.
Phyllis absent, and Russo.
Yes.
Okay, this motion is declared approved. Any person desiring to appeal the decision to a court of record may do so within 30 days after the decision is filed with the city clerk's office. Thank you. All right, moving on to the next item on the agenda. This is going to be EXC 21-0008. This is an application submitted by Newman Munson Architects requesting a special exception to allow a rooftop service area for a non-conforming drinking establishment in a central business CB-10 zone at 111 East College Street. The public hearing is now open and we will hear from staff.
Thank you. I'm just getting my screen up. There we go. Okay. EXC 21-0008. As you had mentioned, Newman Munson Architects is requesting a special exception for a rooftop service area, which I will refer to throughout as an RSA, which will be for a non-conforming drinking establishment in the CB10 zone. So this is the site plan. Again, you can see 111 East College Street highlighted in the white dashed line. It is on the Ped Mall, just south of the Ped Mall, with an alley to the south of it. It's east of South Clinton Street. And it is currently zoned CB10 with a OHD overlay, which is with a historic district overlay. So this is part of the Tailwinds project. I'll talk about that in a minute, but it is surrounded on the east and west by other buildings that are also the central business district with the historic district overlay. And then to the north is additional CB10 zoning and the same to the south. And it's surrounded by a mix of different uses. So as I had noted, it is part of the Tailwinds project. So some of you will be familiar with this, but to refresh your memory, it does include both the renovation of existing historic structures along the south side of the pedestrian mall. So that includes the rehabilitation of commercial space on those properties. And it also includes an 11-story multifamily building to the south of the existing structures. And that was one that the board had approved a parking reduction for. As far as the proposed drinking establishment that would be here, I may occasionally also call it Reunion Brewery or the proposed Reunion Brewery. That is who the applicant is working with currently. And it is a non-conforming drinking establishment use, which meets some special criteria that council had adopted on May 27th, which the goal is to promote historic preservation and maintain the economic vitality of downtown. I talk about that a bit more in the staff report, but basically it tells you how the use is allowed here. As far as what the applicant is proposing, they would like to construct a terrace on the rooftop of the south side of 111 East College Street which would provide approximately 1,430 square feet of open air seating. So as I had mentioned, this is what the aerial looks like, but it is not a current aerial because the back of those buildings are down. So I'll show you some additional pictures in a second. But that darker roof in the middle is 111 East College Street. How the RSA fits in then is the red X is where that rear addition had been demolished. And then that yellow box in the center part is where the proposed RSA would be. So they will retain some interior space to the north as well. And the building to the west is also part of the proposed brewery, but it's not part of the RSA. And this is what that looks like fully phased in. This is the building from the front. And you can see the pedestrian mall on both sides from the front. This is what the back looks like currently. So you can see the proposed building is this one right here next to the extended wall that goes there. There are 6 windows on it as well. You can also see that the exterior wall is still there, and that is going to be retained even with the RSA. So really what they're doing is they're lifting off the top of the roof for part of the area to create open air seating, but they will retain those walls around it. And this was part of the project that was reviewed by the Historic Preservation Commission as well. So the role of the board tonight is to review and approve with conditions, or deny the application based on the facts presented. And it would have to meet both specific standards pertaining to the waiver requested and general standards for all special exceptions. So in this case, the specific standards can be found at 14.4C2AA1, which is accessory use standards, and specifically approval criteria for rooftop service areas. And there are quite a few standards. So some of these may start to sound redundant, and I will try to touch on new facts as they come up, but I will also point out the ways that I think that these criteria are met. But bear with me as I go through them. So the first criteria is related to accessibility, that it has to meet building and fire codes and be ADA compliant with elevator service and accessible restrooms. The proposed RSA will be fully accessible with an elevator at the north end of the building providing access, and there will be accessible restrooms on the same floor as the building. As far as other building and fire codes, those will be reviewed during the building permit review. The second set of criteria, there are a couple under this sub-criteria, are related to design. And basically, they're trying to ensure that it's designed in an attractive manner that will not detract from adjacent uses or prevent, and that will prevent nuisance and safety issues. And it does point out specifically, I mean, this is the case with all special exceptions, but it wants to make sure that the board is aware that you can require more restrictions than are currently required just by the virtue of the special exception itself. So the first design criteria is that it has to be located directly adjacent to or above the use to which it is accessory, and there can't be other uses located on the floor in between the RSA and the use to which it is accessory. So the submitted site plan does illustrate the proposed dimensions, setbacks, occupancy, landscaping, accessibility, and other required elements, which is required under the broader bullet point. And staff does recommend that compliance with the submitted site plan be a condition of approval. Otherwise, the proposed RSA is directly adjacent to and above the drinking establishment to which it is accessory. And the only use in the building is that proposed reunion brewery. So it meets, staff believes that it meets this standard. Second criteria is that it has to be set back from adjacent upper floor uses and the edge of the roof and be screened and completely enclosed within a decorative fence or wall built of high quality durable materials. The RSA will be screened by the existing exterior walls of the historic building. They are 16 feet tall. So as far as other screening and setbacks go, to the north, there is an interior dining area that'll separate the RSA from the pedestrian mall. To the west, there's interior space that will separate it from adjacent upper floor uses. And to the east, it will be separated by, again, that existing party wall that's there. And then to the south, there will be that exterior wall that I had showed in the picture, which will have those windows. And then the RSA itself will also be set back 6 feet from that south facade of that wall, and the site plan indicates that it will include vegetative roof components within that setback area, which will provide some additional buffering. So based on this and some other findings, the screening is part of the existing building shell, and it won't negatively impact light, air, or outdoor views from abutting buildings as well. So again, just to point out how the screening works, you can see the site plan again. You can see interior space to the north and to the west. You can see the existing party wall to the east, and you can see the existing wall and setback area on the south side. So sometimes it's easier if I can visually share that as well. The third design criteria is that it has to be set back 10 feet from the street facing edge of the roof, and a designed proposed buffer and screen wall shall be submitted with the application. So you have that submitted with the application in your application packet or in your agenda packet. As far as the street facing facade, in this case, that is the pedestrian wall, which is technically East College Street. So the RSA is set back 24 feet from that street. Again, to the north and west, exterior walls to the south and east, and the 6-foot setback from that wall to the south will help prevent safety and nuisance issues. And other ways to prevent safety and nuisance issues is that there will be a minimum of 5 staff persons at this level who will ensure safety, address nuisances, and prevent underage drinking. Some of these standards also relate to the overarching standards and the design criteria. So if it seems a little out of place, it's related to those overall standards as well. But based on these things and a staff recommendation that compliance with the submitted management plan be a condition of approval, staff believes that these standards are met. Fourth design criteria is that the lighting must comply with the outdoor lighting standards of this title, and that a lighting plan be submitted that illustrates compliance. So they did submit a lighting plan, which indicates that canopy lights will be the primary exterior light source. It's expected to have a total outdoor light output of 6,500 lumens, which is well below the maximum allowed by code. The management plan also notes that those lights will be turned off when the RSA is not in use. And there are some time limits associated with the RSA just by the virtue of the RSA and the use that is there. In addition, to fully ensure compliance, staff recommends that approval of a lighting site plan be required prior to issuance of a building permit, which would be a more detailed site plan like you would have seen in other special exception cases. So that's where staff recommends that to ensure compliance. But otherwise, staff finds that these criteria are met. Final design criteria is that no sign shall be allowed in or on the exterior wall or fence of the RSA within public view. So for the proposed use, there is a logo-based mural planned for the interior portion of the east wall within the RSA, but it won't be visible from any public street, sidewalk, access easement, park, or other open space, which is the definition of public view. So staff finds that this criteria is met. The next set of criteria are related to management. So first, I touched on this briefly already, but first, that there must be an RSA management plan in place, and at least one employee must be designated to monitor the safety and compliance of the RSA during hours of operation. I did want to note that the proposed RSA will serve alcohol, so it is considered an outdoor service area, which brings some additional standards to play that are incorporated in the management plan. As far as staff on the roof, the management plan notes that there will be a minimum of 5 staff persons, so they will be the ones ensuring compliance during the hours of operation. And if nuisance or safety issues arise, the management plan may be modified. And I'll talk about temporary use permits later. That's related to amplified sound, but those can also be amended, suspended, or revoked. So based on these findings and based on that criteria that I had mentioned earlier that staff recommends, which is substantial compliance with the management plan, staff believes that this is met. Second management criteria is that in the CB10 zone where the building containing the RSA abuts or is directly across a public alley from a property containing upper floor residential uses, or hotel rooms that have windows facing the RSA, hours of operation must be limited. I'm not going to read them because in this case, the RSA doesn't abut or is not directly across a public alley from a property containing upper floor residential uses or hotel rooms. So that is, in a very specific sense, this criteria does not apply. However, there will be upper floor residential windows facing the proposed RSA, and that'll be in that new 11-story building that I discussed, which is part of the project. But you will find a letter in your application materials that discusses this in a bit more detail, but it is under the same ownership. There is that existing wall that will be maintained, which will help mitigate noise and light conflicts for windows facing that RSA. And the exterior light fixtures, as I had mentioned previously, will face downwards. So staff had considered conditioning time limits on it, but based on the findings and the circumstances of this RSA, staff doesn't believe that that's necessary and finds that these standards are met. The next specific criteria is related to food service. So if alcohol is being served, food service must be provided, and they have to submit evidence about how this will be met. So as I had mentioned previously, alcohol will be served in the proposed RSA, and the management plan does include details that they will have a fully functional kitchen and substantial food service must be provided for all hours of operation. And again, compliance with that management plan is recommended as a condition of approval. Regarding noise, the design of the RSA must minimize the carry of noise across property values. And so staff may, or the board may require, different screening materials, evidence of a noise mitigation plan must be included. And there's an opportunity to provide additional measures if there are issues. So the management plan does contain some provisions to help manage noise on the RSA, and the existing walls, as I mentioned previously, will minimize the carry of noise across property values. With regards to amplified sound, at this time, the applicant has not said that they will provide amplified sound. If they do wish to provide that, they will require a separate temporary use permit. That would be a seasonal permit to be updated annually, and if there are issues that would be that could be revoked. With that temporary use permit comes the requirement of a sound mitigation plan that would comply with this section. But without amplified sound, staff doesn't have any issues with this criteria. And then amplified sound has its own specific criteria as well, that it is only allowed with certain uses, subject to some limitations. So this RSA is in the CB10 zone. Like I had said, it requires a seasonal temporary use permit, which includes requirements that it's limited to background noise at a low volume, and that there is a requirement that has to be more than 100 feet from other service areas or be inaudible to those other areas. And then there's also a requirement for a sound mitigation plan as part of that temporary use permit process. And it may be denied or rescinded if noise becomes a nuisance or if the terms of the temporary use permit or the special exception are violated. So based on these findings, again, they're not proposing amplified sound at this time, but based on these findings, staff believes that this criteria will be met / is met. There are also some sub-criteria regarding amplified sound. So first, if it's located within 300 feet of a residential zone, it's prohibited. It's not, so that's not applicable. Second, the city may restrict the hours when amplified sound may be used, but it in no case will be permitted between the hours of 12 o'clock midnight and 10 o'clock a.m. So the management plan notes that. And again, that would be required if they have to do a temporary use permit for the amplified sound. Third, they're not allowed to use live entertainment using amplification, which the management plan notes, and it may be restricted or prohibited during public events, festivals, or concerts, which is noted in the management plan as well. And they also note that the operator will comply with other requests to restrict or prohibit sound. So that would include requests by the city. And then the applicant must also demonstrate to the satisfaction of the city that the design of the RSA will minimize carrier noise across property boundaries, as I previously noted, but this is specifically related to amplified sound. So again, they're not proposing amplified sound at the moment, but it's surrounded by existing building facade, which minimizes the carry of sound, and it will only be allowed through a temporary use permit, which requires those additional standards. There are also some specific standards related to additional approval criteria for non-conforming drinking establishments, which this one is. So first, it must be located directly above and contiguous to the licensed drinking establishment. This is similar to a previous criteria, but it's directly above and contiguous to the licensed drinking establishment to which it is accessory, and the Reunion Brewery is the only use in this building. Second, there can't be a horizontal expansion of that drinking establishment. Because the RSA is completely located above it, there's not a horizontal expansion of the drinking establishment through the RSA. And then finally, there cannot be an increase in interior floor area or interior occupant load of the existing drinking establishment, except if necessary for certain specific criteria. And the proposed RSA will not increase interior floor area because it is all exterior space. And it won't increase interior occupant load, but staff does recommend a condition that no solid roof be allowed to be constructed over any point in the future to ensure that there is not a future increase in the interior floor area. So making sure that that's attached to the property. Then there's the 7 general criteria at 14.4b3. So first, can't be detrimental to or endanger public health, safety, comfort, or general welfare. Again, the use of the property and access to the property and surrounding properties won't change. And the proposed RSA and any heat sources must meet all applicable fire and safety regulations in the building permit. Also must be ADA compliant. As far as access goes, to promote safety, the management plan notes that customers must present an ID before entering the RSA, and underage patrons will not be allowed without supervision after 10 p.m. And so that matches existing city ordinances. And as additional protection, starting at 9, customers must also present the ID at the first level entrance as well. And there are other things in the management plan that talked about how they'll prevent nuisances and some of those other health safety concerns that are not included in this finding, but have been mentioned previously. The site plan also shows that the RSA will be set back from the private alley to the south and will be surrounded by existing walls of the historic structure to prevent people from accessing other rooftop areas. And again, the rooftop service area will be actively managed with at least 5 staff based on the management plan, and they'll ensure compliance. So staff believes that this criteria is fully met. The second is that it cannot injure the use or enjoyment of property in the immediate vicinity or impair property values. So it is screened on all sides. There's a setback to the south. Those will help prevent nuisance and safety issues on surrounding properties. And there's the interior building space, which screens it to the north and west. And there are no buildings to the east. As far as lighting goes, it'll all face downward and comply with outdoor lighting standards, and noise will be controlled as discussed previously. And then in addition to that, the renovation will help ensure the continued economic viability of this space. Parts of it have been vacant for a while now. And so as a result, that would be seen as having a positive impact on surrounding properties. So staff believes that this criteria is met. As far as impeding normal and orderly development for surrounding uses, it's in the downtown district, zone CB10 with the historic district overlay. It allows quite a few different uses, and RSAs were initially allowed to create more diverse seasonal opportunities. Like I said, there's already a mix of uses around it, and most of them, the ones immediately to the east and west are obviously part of this redevelopment project. But to the south, the building will be, or the RSA will be about 20 feet from that building. And it's 20, or it's more than that to buildings to the north where other existing buildings are. So with appropriate controls on amplified sound and other noise issues, staff does believe that the proposed use is compatible with surrounding development. It won't affect redevelopment in the future, and it should be an attractive addition to downtown. So staff believes that that is met. With regards to access facilities and utilities, the site already has existing services, and all the details of those will be reviewed during building permit. For the RSA, it's not expected to really impact anything. Those are more tied to the broader redevelopment project, but for the existing RSA, it's not as applicable. And then ingress or egress, access to the building is primarily expected to be through that pedestrian mall. There is a private alley just south of it, but otherwise no changes are being proposed that will affect traffic congestion on public streets. So this is also less applicable than other standards. And then it must meet all other regulations for the zone. And an approved lighting plan for the proposed use is recommended as a condition of approval, as I had noted, to ensure compliance with those outdoor lighting standards. Again, the RSA will serve alcohol, so it will have to comply with outdoor lighting service area outdoor service area standards. That has its own process associated with it in staff review. And it will also have to receive a liquor license through the city, which has its own process. And then if there's amplified sound, that also has an additional process through the temporary use permit. So based on all these reviews and staff's current review, staff believes that this criteria is met. And then finally, must be consistent with the comprehensive plan. The future land use map shows this area for general commercial and includes a vision for continued investment downtown to ensure its place as a center of arts, culture, entertainment, commercial, and civic activity within the city and metro. And the downtown riverfront crossings master plan talks about this as the heart of the region with historic buildings next to new buildings and streets that are active throughout the day and into the night, with some objectives about quality infill and maintaining a balance of uses and activities. One of the reasons the outdoor service area or the RSA standards were created was to help promote different activities that could be available. So based on these findings, staff does believe that this criteria is met. And in addition, the use isn't changing from it, and the non-conforming drinking establishment use is also consistent. I did also note previously that the historic landmark of the building that was reviewed by the Historic Preservation Commission as well. So just wanted to reiterate those points. So based on these findings regarding the general and specific approval criteria, staff recommends approval of EXC 21-0008 to allow an RSA as an accessory use to a non-conforming drinking establishment in a CV10 zone at 111 East College Street, subject to 4 conditions. So first is substantial compliance with the submitted site plan, which was dated March 1st, 2020. Compliance with the management plan, which is dated July 9th, 2021. The requirement about not allowing a solid roof to be constructed over any portion of the RSA in the future. And then also that a lighting plan in compliance with the zoning ordinance be approved by the building official prior to issuance of a building permit. So those are the conditions that staff recommends. I did also, just because it's kind of a complicated process for this review, so I wanted to go over next steps briefly for the sake of the board. So again, first it would need a building permit, which would need to be approved by the NDS, and that is where the outdoor lighting plan would need to be approved if that condition is adopted by the board. Then there would be 2 permits, one for a liquor license, one for an outdoor service area, which would be submitted simultaneously to be approved by City Council in the Iowa Alcoholic Beverages Division. Again, that OSA permit is where they would also include a noise mitigation plan to minimize the carry of noise. And if in the future they want amplified sound, they would also need the temporary use permit, which would be approved by the Neighborhood Development Services Division. So those are kind of the other permits affiliated with this RSA. Like I said, it's a little bit of a complicated project, but just want to make sure you could wrap your heads around it. And as far as public comments go, we have not received any public comments regarding this prior to this, so there are none in your packet. The applicant did hold a good neighbor meeting, but no neighbors attended. Those who were invited were within a 300-foot area, which is the same to which we provided notice of this public meeting. And otherwise, as I said, comments have not been received regarding this application. So that concludes staff's review of the criteria and staff's recommendation. And it's complicated, so just let me know if you have any questions about my presentation.
Thank you, Kirk. Any questions for Kirk before we hear from the applicant?
Kurt, you have an estimate how many people, what's the carrying capacity of that area? How many people will be allowed up there?
It is in the staff report, so let me take a look. Unless the applicant is here and can speak to it faster than me, which would probably be the case.
I think it's 97.
I was gonna say, I thought it was right around 100. It is 97. That is the load. Thank you, Parker.
Oh,
And that's based on square footage.
It's based on square footage, but it can't increase the occupancy of the overall building. And so that's one of the special exception criteria. So that just gets basically subtracted out from the rest of the building, as I understand it. Final occupancy would be determined at the building permit issuance, but they would also have access to these standards as well that they'd be judging it by.
And then Kirk, how many levels of the, I guess, facade are there? I remember walking down that area and I thought it was 3 levels. This is
So-
only taking up 2.
It is a 2-story building for this part.
Gotcha.
It can be hard to tell from the back. If you'd like, I can show you the back again and kind of highlight that.
I'm good. I'm just trying to envision it from the front. So,
Yeah,
Appreciate
it's a
it.
2-story building.
okay.
And the second story is occupied, a portion of the second story is occupied by an enclosed dining area. And the remainder is this open area. Is that correct?
Correct.
But there's really no back wall other than just the wall that supports the roof at the back of the building, right? I mean, that's not really enclosing it, right?
So it will enclose it. They will keep what is essentially the existing historic facade, and they will tear the roof off half of it, essentially. So that wall on the back will be between
I see.
the building and the property line. It can be a little hard to tell with the site plans.
That's an 8 or 10 foot wall then, is that
It's a 16-foot wall,
16 foot wall?
but there will be windows in it as well.
Just trying to imagine what will occur up there on a game day.
Sure.
I mean, you know, that's sort of what it's set up for. And I'm wondering, do TVs, I'm sure there will be a lot, you know, a large screen TV. Does that come into play with amplified sound? Is that?
I believe that TVs are counted as part of amplified sound. Usually it's tied to, like, if you have an outdoor sound system or something, surround sound, whatever you would have for your typical dining experience inside, but it would be outside.
When they say 5 staff members, at least 3 of them are waiting staff, correct? So I mean, the idea of sort of, I mean, I'm just imagining you know, 97 plus people on a game day, you know, how crazy that can get. I'm just wondering if is that all crowd control, or is that just staff? They could be bus people, they could be waiters, waitresses. What is that?
It would be staff, and I can give you a breakdown in a second. It's detailed in the management plan, but It is. Okay, the staff on the floor area. There will be a minimum of one manager, one doorman, one bartender, and two servers. And that's the minimum. I imagine, that's the minimum that would be required. My guess is that if they require more, they would put more up there. And if they do have issues with some of these things, they're going to have to deal with those issues, or otherwise there can be steps taken against that use.
But if there are only, let's say there are only 10 people up there, they would still have to have 5 management people there.
Yep, because that is the management plan that they have submitted, and has a minimum of 5. And well, if you approve the condition that they have to comply with their management plan, but yes, they would need to have 5 people up there then.
No matter how few people are up there. I mean, that might not happen, but at some point there may be just a few there, but they still have to have 5 people there.
As it's currently written, yes.
But they would be sharing that staff. I'm just trying to figure this out. They'd be sharing that staff with the indoor dining area as well. Is that correct?
Correct.
So potentially, so 97 people is the capacity for the outdoor area. What's the capacity for the indoor area? Or has that already been addressed? I'm just curious.
That I don't know offhand. In this case, I did not review the RSA with those interior areas, since we are just looking at the RSA. But I can't answer. I'm not sure about that question. I don't know if the applicant would be able to answer that one.
You can buy me some time. I think I can find it.
And we can move on to until you want to ask questions of the applicant directly, or if the applicant wants to speak, and then we can address it at that time.
Any other questions for Kirk? If not, we'll go ahead and hear from the applicant.
And you can still ask me questions if we need to tag team it too. That's fine. So.
It looks like the overall occupancy load is about 450, and that would include the 97 on the patio.
But would that include, okay, there's a private dining area that faces, abuts the mall. So what is the capacity of that? Because that should be, would that be included in, that would not be included in the 97 up above?
That capacity is 49.
But that would be 49 plus the 97.
Correct.
For the second floor.
At maximum capacity, yeah.
Okay.
Hi, by the way, I'm Parker Dilberstein with Newman Munson Architects. I'm actually filling in for Nick Lindsley, who's on vacation. But I'm familiar with the rest of the Tailwind project, the other buildings in this project. So I'm mostly here to answer any questions. I guess what I'll say is this is a pretty exciting project, and we feel fortunate to be working with the tenant on it. I don't know if you know the tenant. He's well established, well known in the area, has relationships with the neighbors, and I think he's conscientious of those relationships. And it's basically a unique feature to a unique establishment. We think it's a viable business for the downtown area.
Board, do you
So
have any
in
other
order to
questions?
gain it, I'm
Oh,
sorry,
go ahead.
Amy.
Nope, I was just asking if the board had any questions for Parker.
So in order to gain access to the enclosed area up second floor, you would still be carted and whatever to get upstairs. And could they move from the covered area into the open air area?
I mean, if I had to guess, I think they cart at the front door and then anyone can move from the indoor to the outdoor areas, is what I would imagine.
So what the management plan states is that at the entrance of the rooftop, the doorman who will be required to be there will mark underage patrons with an ink stamp, and they won't be allowed after 10 p.m. So I think the plan is based on the management plan that they'll be required to follow, that they will mark them as they get upstairs. And then again, as it starts to get later, where they're going to start kicking out underage folks, they would also card at the door downstairs. And I imagine that there are probably other times where they would also card downstairs, but that's not specifically addressed in the management plan. They just note that 9 o'clock time period.
So basically, if you wanted to look at the capacity of the covered dining area upstairs and the outdoor space upstairs, you have a capacity for 142 people. Is that correct? And they could move around. Could they move around from the outdoor space to the indoor space? Or is that private area, is that dining area sort of screened off most of the time?
There's a wall, and I think
It
it's
looked like there
probably
were glass doors that could be opened or closed.
I think there's only 2 man doors. I don't think it's completely open back and forth. I think that's what you're asking. Well, wait a minute. No, this plan shows an operable nano wall system. So there's an operable wall that panels that fold together would create an open space.
It would essentially become one continuous space then, correct? I'm just curious how I'm sure you've done all the engineering. How do you ensure that only 97 people get in there?
I think it's a common problem for a lot of these establishments. You end up with signs on walls that say maximum occupant, but it's up to the building, the tenant or the business owner to police it.
So can the covered dining area have amplified sound?
Yeah, indoor sound would not be considered by the RSA application. Even if it's open, it'd be similar to having, like, you wouldn't prevent a business from allowing its windows to be open with amplified sound. It's just not part of the rooftop service area regulations or considered by outdoor regulations generally. That would be covered by other noise regulations in the city, but
I'm sorry if my questions probably duplicate other, probably pre-existing regulations and authorities. I'm just, I'm all new to this, but so you could potentially you could have the nano wall open, and you could have live music inside, and that would be not regulated.
I believe you are correct, yes.
So if and you've determined that that neighbors in the high rises at Park at 201 and the Plaza Towers, et cetera, that are they out of sort of reach of a amplified sound projection from this? I don't want you to get into into a neighborhood squabble over this. That's all.
Yeah, so for staff review, we did not consider amplified sound in this because, you know, that's not regulated under the RSA regulation specifically. As it relates to outdoor amplified sound, I'm expecting that they would get that permit. And again, still is other recourse, you know, if there are noise or nuisance complaints through other provisions in the city code. I imagine that's how it would be, for example, if you had a similar circumstance with a door that could be open, garage doors, let's say, and you were playing inside, but it was going outside, you know. Those are generally regulated through other standards. Staff also believes that the way that with the existing walls being 16 feet high, that's going to reflect a lot of the sound rather than horizontally, more upward. And so we're not anticipating that to be a huge issue, but if they are ramping up sound with temporary use permits or whatever, then there would be required to have a more detailed noise management plan that they would have to submit. But staff just didn't think it was necessary with the existing application based on the uses as we see them. And I didn't note this earlier, but the only other real example of an RSA downtown right now is Joe's. So.
Well, what about Hilton Garden Inn?
So those don't have to go by special exception. The only other special exception approved rooftop service area is Joe's.
I'm pretty sure the Board of Adjustment did it because I remember voting on Hilton Garden Inn outdoor area.
Interesting. I believe that they are provisionally allowed for if they're affiliated with a hospitality oriented use. But part of it might have come before the board. I'm not sure. I could take a look back at that, but Joe's is kind of the precedent that I'm more familiar with, I guess, is what I would say.
Any other questions for Parker or staff at this time? All right. Is there any member of the public who wishes to speak in favor of this application? Any member of the public here tonight that wishes to speak against the application? Doesn't sound like it. If there's no additional comments for staff, if the board has any other questions, if anybody feels a need to defer, make it known at this time. Otherwise, I will proceed to close the public hearing. All right. The public hearing is now closed. Would someone make a motion to approve the special exception to put it on the table for discussion?
I'll make that motion.
All right. Do we need any more, Sue, do we need any more information along with that one?
Yeah, I'll just fill in, and Mark, you can say if you agree. You're moving to apply to approve the application submitted by Newman Munson Architects requesting a special exception to allow rooftop surface area for a non-conforming drinking establishment in the CB10 zone at 111 East College Street.
And is there a second?
I'll second it.
Sue, does that need to note that it includes the conditions, or does that come later?
I think you could do it either way if you want to make it now with the conditions, or if you want to put it with the findings of fact, including the conditions. But then I would actually set forth for the record what those conditions are. If making sure someone has it up in front of them, or Kurt, you can put it up on the screen to remind the board at least what staff's proposed conditions were.
Do you want to make those conditions now, Mark, as part of your motion?
Yes, I'd like to.
Okay, let me get back to that.
It's page 82.
Okay, can you see him, Mark?
Yes. Mhm.
So would you like to lay them out for the record as to what the conditions?
Do you want me
Yeah.
to read them out?
You gotta read them, Mark.
Okay, I'm sorry. The conditions are substantial compliance with the submitted site plan dated March 1, 2020. Compliance with the submitted management plan dated July 9, 2021. No solid roof shall be constructed over any portion of the RSA. Number 4, a lighting plan in compliance with the zoning ordinance shall be approved by the building official prior to the issuance of a building permit.
And just to confirm, Nancy, your second would be seconding with those
I would
conditions.
second that also then.
Excellent. Board, do you want to have any discussion related to this before we have someone make the findings of fact? Would someone like to make the findings of fact at this time?
I can do that. I have it in front of me. Regarding item EXC 21 what is this one? 0008. Yep. I concur with the findings set forth in the staff report of 14 July and conclude that the general and specific standards are satisfied unless amended or opposed by another board member. I recommend the board adopt the findings in the staff report for the approval of this special exception.
Thank you, Bryce. If there's no other comments before we vote, which it does not sound like there are, I will ask city staff to do roll call.
Russo,
Aye.
Carlson,
Yes.
Parker,
Yes.
Pretorius,
Yes,
Rochelle is absent.
this motion is declared approved. Any person desiring to appeal this decision to a court of record may do so within 30 days after the decision is filed with the city clerk's office. Thank you. All right, moving on to item EX 21-0009. This is an application submitted by Axiom Consultants requesting a special exception to allow a 50% parking reduction for other unique circumstances to construct a new mixed-use building at 21 South Lynn Street. The public hearing is now open and we will hear from staff.
So let me get back to the right one. The applicant has requested that this item actually be delayed. So you'll find a memo similar to what we did in previously for Hy-Vee, but in that one we deferred before opening the public hearing. In this case, they're requesting to defer specifically until August 11th. And so staff would recommend that you leave the public hearing open and defer the hearing until that August 11th meeting to discuss it further.
All right. Any questions for staff? Otherwise, perhaps a board member would like to request deferral.
Do we just say that we would like to leave the public hearing open until our next meeting on August 11th? Is that the correct way to do it?
And defer.
Or defer?
Yeah, so you want to leave the public hearing open and defer till August 11th. So the motion would include both those things.
Okay.
Can I ask, is this just procedural or why do you leave the public hearing? Or why do we even open the public hearing if it's
Because we have to notify, we have to publish notice of the public hearing, and if it's not, and we said it was going to be tonight. And so if you close the public hearing or you don't open it, then you'd have to republish notice,
I understand.
do the
Okay.
whole process over again, so.
I move that we defer EXC 21-009 until our next meeting on August, what's the date? 11th?
11th.
11th. And that we defer and leave the public hearing open until August 11th.
Thank you, Nancy. Do
Did I
we have a
cover the
second?
things I need to cover?
That's it. Is there a second
Second.
for Nancy's deferment?
Second.
Thank you. All right, and then do we need a vote to defer at this point in time?
Just
Believe.
voice vote, all in favor is fine.
All right, all in favor?
I
Aye.
Aye.
Excellent. All right. Otherwise, I believe the next item is the consideration of meeting minutes from the June 30th, 2021 Board of Adjustments meeting. Is there a motion to accept the minutes?
A motion to accept the meeting minutes of, what was it, June
14th?
30th.
30th?
Oh, you're right. It's the 30th. Sorry. Don't let me lead you astray.
June 30th. Do I have a second?
Oh, hang on a second. Can Bryce approve? That was Bryce at the June 30th? It was like the training session, right?
Yes.
That's right. Can I do that?
You
I think
can.
I think I can do that.
Let's do that. Does anybody second that?
I second.
Excellent. All right, the meeting minutes are approved. Board of Adjustments and announcements for item number 5. Are there any announcements?
The only announcement that I have is that this will be our last online meeting. So we will resume in-person meetings starting, I think, any meeting after September 25th. So obviously our August 11th hits that. We will meet in Emma Harvett Hall in the City Hall. And we will still be recording meetings and publishing them. So as I had stated earlier, when we started recording these meetings, that's just part of our new standards. So it'll be similar to a council meeting, other than I don't think we're going to be broadcast live. I think it'll just be, they'll post the meeting once they record it. Do you have any questions about in-person meetings? Because many of you have only done online meetings. And if not, you can always, oh, go ahead, Mark.
Is there a dress code? It's just,
I don't believe so.
Yeah, tuxedo.
Bryce, are you going to be back?
Yeah, I'll be back.
Cool.
And we're not currently allowing hybrid meetings. I don't think we will allow hybrid meetings where people can Zoom in or whatever. They're going to have to attend in person as well. I think we might, if there is a reason, Bryce, where you would need to be abroad. I know that you can occasionally have people call in. I imagine we could work something out with Zoom similar to that. It's a little different than the public calling in. So
Gotcha.
just wanted to make you aware of that so you weren't worried if you weren't going to be here. But I think that's, oh, there was one other thing that I wanted to mention that is in your packet, and it is tied to American Recovery Act funds. So this is something where the city is requesting public input on how to spend those American Recovery funds, and they were hoping that boards and commissions could weigh in on it. So you can either weigh in on it as a board, you can take the individual survey that's available, and you can make that decision as you will, but the survey information is available on that letter that I attached to your packet. So just wanted to make you aware of that. If you have any questions, I assume you would contact Rachel Kilberg in the city manager's office, whose name is on that letterhead. If you need contact information or anything, you can always shoot me a message and I can pass it along. But those are my announcements.
All right. Excellent. Well, at this point in time, is there someone willing to make a motion to adjourn?
I'll make that.
Okay, I just have a question after this.
All right. Motion to
I
adjourn.
second, Tom.
Thanks, Bryce. All right, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.